Okay. Thank you for bearing with us through the technical difficulties. If you're having a hard time hearing us, let us know in the comments if you could, just because we're going live from both of our phones right now, just to try to get a little bit more engagement and a little bit of a larger audience. So if you are having a hard time hearing, drop a comment below and we'll get it fixed up. But we are so excited. Welcome back to Monumental Minds, where every mind matters. I'm Megan Rose.
And I'm Mariah Ray, and we're the co-owners and co-founders of MR2 Connections Incorporated. It's a really special night for us here tonight because we're going to have our first guest speaker with us. She's been a longtime friend of mine and hopefully a longtime friend of Megan's to come.
Yes, I'm so excited. I've actually never met her personally myself, so you're going to be able to meet her along with me. So we're really excited to introduce her, and we'll get her joined into our video here shortly.
Yep. All right, guys, let's join in and we'll get started.
So she has to request to be on mine too. How does that work?
I don't know.
Okay, so this might work. So hold on one second.
Hey.
Hi.
Let me readjust here because we're trying to figure out if we can adjust it on Megan's phone as well. Did it work?
So no, it won't let me because she would have to request both of us.
Yeah, then.
Which way is easier? Either up and down. There we go.
We're working through the kinks.
Yes.
It's so nice to meet you. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. It means so much to us. You have no idea.
Oh, that's no problem.
Yeah, so let's just kind of dig right in. Let's get people ready to know kind of where mental health started for you. Let me get this camera from falling off the table.
No problem. Kind of in the same mix of myself right now.
Right. Camera stay.
There we go. Look at that.
All right.
All right.
Okay. New ring lights, all the things.
Yeah, we just got new ring lights. I'm so sorry.
It looks so nice, though. It's great.
Thank you. We're super excited. We're expanding quickly.
All right.
All right. Perfect.
I'll sit here next to you.
Okay. Yay.
Perfect.
All right. So you had mentioned to us that mental health had become a big factor at a very early age. Can you at third grade? I think you mentioned. So
Correct.
can you tell us a little bit about that?
So in around third, fourth grade, my parents ended up splitting. My dad ended up leaving. So it was actually really traumatizing, especially because I actually was hearing impaired as well. So we were trying to battle me being hearing impaired, and at the same time, my dad then leaving, and still trying to have my siblings there. And my mom is a single mom. So it was just a lot just going on as a kid when you're trying to help raise two other kids that are your brothers from a really young age that you don't know how to do. You're just a kid yourself trying to help raise two kids, helping your mother. So it was actually really hard, and not knowing why he left. I probably blamed most of my childhood on myself of why my dad left. Was it my fault? Was it our fault? Were we not good enough? And I think I spent most of my childhood thinking that for probably through middle school and high school, until I really had to sit there and say, it's not my fault that he left. But that's as kids, you wonder why your parents get divorced, and you think, is it me? Is it my fault? It's hard.
Yeah, that is very hard. And, so many young kids, you just don't understand. And it's such a heavy burden to bear through those younger years. And, did you have anybody helping you through that? Or you said you were raising your brothers and sisters pretty much, right, at that point?
Correct. So my mom used to work overnights, and she would have to be at home and stay with them and watch them and help them with homework. We had a school guidance counselor and a small group as a kid, but it wasn't full-fledged of going to see a therapist, going to have a conversation, because being a single family home and the area we're in, we were on public aid for most of my childhood, to be honest with you. So right. Trying to get into a therapist, trying to get into a psychiatrist, you're trying to call and you can't get one. Right. So you're just using the smallest amount of resources you can, which was at school, which was maybe twice a week at a lunch break.
Right.
So you only get 30 minutes by yourself one day and then 30 minutes with like a group of girls that had similar things. But I mean, they don't have the same tools as what they had now versus years ago, way over 10 years ago.
Yeah. And not having that, access to those things, what were some of the ways that you were able to cope through that or manage through that?
Most of the time, to be honest with you, when I was a kid, there was no coping. I was a very angry child. I was very angry. I was very depressed. Without having the resources until my littlest brother got into early childhood, because they couldn't really hear. They were all speech delayed. Not until Tammy came around. Tammy Johnson was a really big counselor. She used to come to the house once a week, twice a week. I used to go see her kids. She was actually a really big advocate to understand and find songs and do worksheets and things that really benefited when Nathan was in early childhood. Because she wasn't just there for Nathan. She was there for all of us in case we really needed something. And the school counselor was okay, but it's not the same as having someone in your home and being protected and understanding the court case and understanding who and who cannot be around and everything that was going on.
Right. Yeah, that's hard. I know there's so many mixed feelings and all of that, and especially at such a young age. I mean, luckily you had the resources that you had, and like you said, a lot has changed now for what kids have access to and things, but I think we still have a long way to go.
I definitely, without a doubt. I mean, even as adults, I don't think therapy and mental health and any type of psychiatry, I still don't think it's where it should be to where the full potential they need to be to help everyone out.
Right. And I found myself in a very similar situation. Years ago, I fell off my family's insurance, and what do you do at that point? But learn how to cope and navigate through the emotions and, learning your triggers and, how to kind of stay away from the things that might trigger you or, send you down the wrong path. You had mentioned at a young age too, you had struggled in school with some bullying too. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I was not a skinny child at all whatsoever. I was pretty chunky. I had different color hair. My mom kind of just let me do whatever to do to express myself. I had pink hair and blue hair.
Love it.
I had several different colors of hair. And to be honest with you, 2 or 3 of the kids that were older than I was in elementary school, but a lot of the kids that were in my neighborhood were middle school and high schoolers. So a lot of them, I mean, the high schoolers were a lot nicer. They'd come out and hang out, but any of the middle schoolers around our age and even the kids that were in my age group were just really mean. I don't know if it was just the case being that they didn't like things in themselves and they were bullying, or if it was that they thought it was just an outcast thing of, why do you look different? What are you doing? Why are you acting different? Why don't we have the same color hair? I think that's also a struggle that I don't think growing up there was ever that conversation with kids of bullying or what not to do. Now, I mean, a lot of the kids that I watch 2 kids and they're really well behaved. I mean, they know the ins and outs of having those conversations. And even when me and Mariah would hang out, Nina was very just polite and common, and it was so nice. But
it's like a little adult.
Right, they are 100%. They are. But back in the day, it's most of their parents weren't around, or they weren't during the day, or a lot of them were boys too. So a lot of those kids were super immature.
Right.
So, and there's also when you're with a female versus a male, I mean, most of us grow up way quicker than most males do. So they're always immature. Yeah. But it was super hard to be bullied at such a young age. You would go home and you're crying, and your mom's like, it's okay. I was bullied as a kid too. And you're like, well, how do you get through it? And I didn't really get through it until after I had the resources of being able to talk to a school guidance counselor and really just kind of figuring out, is it me? Is it me myself? And she's like, most of the time when you're getting bullied, it's not because of it's who you are. It's because they have other issues they can't handle.
Right. And even at such a young age, it's so hard to understand because you just feel and it takes such a toll on your confidence. It just really destroys your self-worth and, the impression that you feel. And, that's hard. It's hard to manage through. So that's good that, they were able to give you that understanding at a young age, because a lot of kids just can't grasp that concept.
Yeah. And I know Nina's in 1st grade now, and I have to have that conversation with bullying. I mean, it happens way more often than I would like to say, and it's for silly things oh, you're too tall or too big to play with us. Like, you know, that's coming from a point where the other kid is struggling, you know, because like, what does it have to do with being tall, you know, or a little bit bigger in stature than anybody else, really, to be able to play and do all those things. So it just starts so early. And I know it wasn't even first grade, it was previous to that, kindergarten, and even as early as preschool. So it's like so important that even though these conversations like of mental health and bullying are hard, especially to bring up that kind of hate and bring up that conversation with your kid, it's such a must.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you mentioned that your mental health kind of you took another dip and struggled once you hit high school. Can you tell us what happened there?
So when I was in high school, 2011, 2012. So 2012 is when I had my first like real relationship, you could say. Like I would hang out with people, but I like was never in a relationship, and that's where I met Krishan at. And it was just a very toxic situation. Like at first it was fine. And you know, like in high school, you really don't understand the ins and outs of like the relationship. You're still very immature. You're still trying to figure out who you are as a person. So to be honest with you, that was like really hard. I mean, there was definitely cheating involved. There was like a bunch of lying that was involved. Not really on my part because I was extremely loyal to the point of like, we're dating, this is what's going on. But I mean, with Krishana just being very immature about the situation, it was really hard to concept of why would you do this to me? What was going on? I think I spent it was like 3 days. Like the school guidance counselor sent me home for 3 days. I had to go see some lady at Linden Oaks, and they were like, well, you're fine. You're just having you're just having an issue where it's just a normal teenage thing. I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I don't think it's a normal teenage thing, but that's fine. So I stayed home for 3 days, and we really just had like a conversation about it. I had to change lunchrooms. Like the only lunchroom that was like segregated was the freshman lunch. I ended up having to go to a different lunchroom because the group of her girlfriend, and then like the two other people that I'm still friends with now, where it was just really traumatic because like they would taunt you, you wouldn't really know the situation, and it was just too much toxicness back and forth where you're like, I don't know if you're telling the truth, or do I really, really care about you enough to be like, I know you're telling the truth, I'm going to stay by your side. So that was like really hard my freshman year. And that consisted all of my freshman year of just being what happened. I kind of really lost myself because I didn't know who I was as a person after she had left. And that was really hard. So after she had graduated and after left, we really didn't talk. She was in a relationship for like 2 to 3 years. Like it was like an on and off, like once in a while I'll be like, hey, how you doing? What, like there was a message of I hope you're doing well, but it wasn't where we would talk on a daily basis on the phone, anything like that. And then I got into another relationship 2014, right before I graduated early, which wasn't toxic at first until college. So I mean, high school was toxic the first freshman year, sophomore, junior, and then senior year was fine. But I was still battling of the fact that my dad was gone. He moved to Tennessee, and then he finally came back. I was still trying to deal with trying to learn how to advocate for me being hearing impaired and being in special education. So a lot, and honestly, like the counselor that they set you up with, I had to switch probably 2 or 3 of them and argue because every single one of them is just rainbows and sunshine. Everything is happy. You just need to be happy. I'm like, no, you can't just be happy. It doesn't work like that. You can't do that. So I think most of it was just a lot of fighting. And I don't think I've ever learned how to fight for myself that hard when no one else is listening to the things that you need, especially being in special education, especially being in a product of divorce.
Right.
And I think that has always traveled with me because I never had, my mom advocated, but I always was, it's not enough to advocate for what I need. And I was tired of not standing up for myself.
Right. And that's really what we all have to do, right? Like we learn and like you battled with feelings of like shame and guilt and not being worthy, like from 3 all the way then through high school. Really, you just kind of learn to cope better, like in situations here and there. But you really battled with all of that from really 3 on. So I mean, it is a true struggle, and like you really that shame and that self-doubt can really like trigger those mental illnesses, the anxiety, the depression, and then you're fighting that as well. So it's an everyday struggle, right?
It was. I think my senior year, like once it came to my senior year, I think I was barely showing up to school every like 2 to 3 days. I think that was like where the hardest was, is not like knowing that I could get up and do it, but it was to the point where I started taking medication. My doctor had gave me medication, and it just wasn't. She was like, well, you have to try to 6-8 weeks. I'm like, but I can't get up. Like I mentally and physically cannot get out of my bed. And it would be like, I would show up at like first period, then I would show up at like second period. And then it was like, oh, I'm not going into school today because I couldn't get up. And she's like, no, you still got to try it. I'm like, but this is wrong. This is not making me better. This is making me worse.
Right.
And I think that too, not having the correct chemical balance from the medication really threw a lot of things off as well.
Yeah, that's a big factor, especially at that age, because you've got all the hormone changes and there's just so much going on mentally and physically. And if you don't have that right chemical balance, it can send you into a whirl of emotions and situations.
And I think like looking outside in for those people, it always seems like maybe these are just behavioral issues because of the teen stage, right? When really we're, most are trying to scream, no, this is more than this. Please listen, And I think that's where we could all get better about just opening up and being an ear to listen instead of being like, people as humans, we're just quick to judge.
Especially at that age and with the peers that are around you. I mean, were you experiencing bullying at that time too, still through all that?
Mostly through, it was just my freshman year. Probably the end of junior year, there was still like a little bit of bullying. Mostly from before me and my prior girlfriend were together. Some of her friends would like say comments or make comments and things like that. But at the same time, she had never ever came out either to her friends or family that she was gay. So that was also like a hush-hush situation of, okay, do you like me? Do you not like me? We need to make this decision, and find out what's going on. And it was just a lot of back and forth where it was like, she was like, well, I don't like you like that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. And there was like a time of period where I didn't talk to her, and everyone's like, well, where'd Mica go? Like, what's going on? And then she finally opened up about it, where she's like, listen, I'm gay and this is what's going on. And I think that's where everyone kind of settled down and put like their foot down. We're like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't have done those things. I'm like, okay, but it shouldn't have taken someone to be like, hey, this is what's going on, for you not to bully someone.
Right.
Yeah, and how was it for you when you came out to your family? I mean, did you feel comfortable at that point? Because that's a big trigger too. A lot of people just don't feel comfortable or safe in whatever environment. How was that for you?
That was a really rough one. 2012, when I came out to my mom, it was fine. She was like, we were sitting on the couch, and it was me and Krishana, and she's like, okay, so are you going to tell me about this? Are we not talking about this? Can you just tell me? And I'm like, okay, by the way, I'm gay. Sorry. She's like, oh, well, I already do that, so it's fine. My dad, on the other hand, I know he was like trying to get sober at that point. He drank a lot. He didn't do any drugs, but he drank a lot. That's why we really didn't talk, and he wasn't really around, and he moved. And he was like really angry at that point in time. He told my mother, basically in the case being of, how could you let this happen? And she was just like, okay, well, she can't get pregnant. So it was kind of one of those where it was like, I don't know if it was more of he's still back in the day where it was like he still has that type of feeling like, no, that's a bad thing. You shouldn't be gay. You should be dating a man. And I think now looking back at it, I mean, my dad loves my wife to death. I mean, not like they would go on car rides when we go down there, and they go to the store together, and they hang out when they're here. So it's kind of really different to see the growth of who he is over those past 10 years, to see the difference. And I mean, even now, there's still sometimes when you meet somebody and they're like, oh, you're gay? And I'm like, yeah, gay. And I'm like,
not contagious, just gay.
Yeah, like nothing's changed. But like there still are people out there that are like, oh, like there was one person that I was like, hey, this is like, when I told him, I was like, yeah, I have a wife, this is my wife, and like we didn't talk for 3 months, and then had to backtrack, and he's like, all right, you know what, I was an ass, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. He was like, I just didn't know what to do. And I'm like, okay, well, it's okay, you just have to have the conversation about it. Like, it's not posted on a poster anywhere.
Right.
Like, unless you ask, I'm not really going to bring it up to you because I don't feel the need to.
Right. And sometimes it's just as simple as that, just talking about it and being honest and open.
And like so oftentimes we're willing to answer the questions just aren't asked. So, and like it is, you know, we really do have to break those generational things, because I think right now we're kind of like in the middle of getting one of the older generations to understand, but yet there's still a generation that is like, absolutely no, this is a no-go, you know, and then we have a generation where we are getting into them and we're being able to break it, and we're being able to say, you know, this is us and we're here, and like, can you bend your thoughts a little bit and try to get to know me? So I think it's a beautiful thing that like that relationship did unfold how it did, you know, and you got to see that growth and kind of that change in your dad.
Right.
So, after you graduated, that was when you were into the next relationship that you were talking about, right? And
Correct.
in college?
So in December of 2014, I got into another relationship. I had then also graduated early. So I graduated in December.
Yeah, and you went to technical school, you said?
Yeah, I went to Universal Technical Institute in Lisle. I started in January of 2015, and I was only 17.
Oh, wow.
There's only like 3+ girls in that school at a time. Like, there's not many girls in that school at all. So I mean, when I got there, it was fine. Like, you go to school for 8 hours, you go to work for 8 hours. So I was gone probably majority of the day.
Mm-hmm.
There was like, you can't have your cell phone in class unless you're on lunch break. Like, there's no phone calls if you need a pass. Like, it was very dominant of what your requirement was.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the first probably 6 months were fantastic. Like, I loved taking engine classes. Like, all the guys were very respectful, and I think like even the teachers are very respectful for having a female in basically a male dominated school.
Right.
Everything was kind of great. Even past from January until June was fantastic. I think it's once it got more close to like the end of the year is where things kind of really turned. It was very difficult. There was one class that I did fail, and I was like super upset with myself, and I wasn't happy. I was able to take it like the next course, and then I started going to party. As normal people would do when they're in college, they would go party.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I picked the wrong group of people to party. Like, the first set of people I would hang out and party with, I would stay out half the night. I would fall asleep there, drive home at 5:30 in the morning. Then I would have to get ready and then go to work and go to school, and then I would do it all over again for probably a couple of weeks at a time. Once like the group of them graduated, because graduation was like every 3 weeks. So each class you went to was only 3 weeks. No, you're fine.
I'm so sorry.
It's a dog.
Hang out.
Oh, he's like, I just can't.
Look at the baby.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I mean, that was difficult. And then once we graduated, I had met another group of people, and that turned out to be like probably the worst decision I've ever done. His name was Brian. His name was Buddy. Like, that was his nickname was Buddy. We started. I smoked pot probably most of high school, going in through college, and then I started experiencing like coke, and then we did Molly, and then I started drinking more. We went to quite a few raves. I started spending the night there, and that's where I ended up cheating on my ex-girlfriend with, which is something I never wanted to do because of the situation of my dad and the things that happened with Krishana. And to be honest with you, I don't know who I was, what happened. I just lost complete sense of who I was during that period of time. And I became very violent.
Right.
Very violent very quickly. It was a lot of abuse. I remember the one time I went down there to his parents' house, and I tried jumping out of the truck, and he hit me. He took my phone, and I had no phone service for 3 days. I remember having a concussion that weekend, and I had a little bit of memory loss because I got hit so hard.
Oh wow.
And so that was rough. There was a period in time during that where me and him had classes. There's a 4, 5, 6 class that's 9 weeks long, and I ended up being in that class. And there was someone else that I was friends with that was in that class, and we were partners because I did not want to be his partner. I wasn't really talking to him at the point in time.
Right.
During the period of that 4, 5, 6 course, he ended up paying me in the hallway and getting suspended.
Oh my God.
So that was really rough. And then he came back to class again. And I was about to graduate, go to school, go to my job, my like official job. And then he got suspended again for hitting me and hitting another student that he thought I was sleeping with. He hit my car. I ended up in the mental hospital for about 3 days. And so I was still not really sober at that point in time either. So to me, it was like, okay, I'm trying to get sober, but I can't get sober because he was also a recovering vet. So he ended up taking Suboxone. Well, Suboxone is a very high amount of drugs.
Right.
So once you're on it, it's very hard to get off. So during that time, it was very difficult because you're trying to be clean, but you're like wrapped back into the cycle of, no, you need it. You need to go take it. You need to do it. I ended up graduating college, got my degree in automotive, diesel, and Ford. So that it was actually great, but I ended up moving down south of them because it was the addiction part that followed.
Right.
So we ended up moving to Shelbyville, and it was very hard. It's very hard because you're still like in the moment of like, here's like, here, take this, here, take this, here's this. But then I got wrapped into having to go to work and then having to clean that house and then having to do dishes and having to do someone's laundry. And I'm like, dude, this isn't for me.
Right.
Like, no, I'm like, this is not for me. I'm like, I don't want to be someone's slave. I do not want to be cooking and cleaning and doing laundry after you. There'd be times I'd wake up in the middle of him, like, basically raping me. And it was nothing. It was to the point where you just couldn't deal with it, but you weren't sober to be able to handle the situation properly.
Right.
It was difficult just because the fact that you didn't understand what was going on. And then we ended up, that house, we had to move to Decatur, which was like 30 minutes closer to my job instead of like an hour and a half. So that was pretty nice. But then he became more violent, and we had like, his friends were not like probably the safest people to be around. They all kind of did drugs. They all started like showing up and hanging out. And I was just very uncomfortable. By that point in time, I ended up sobering up enough to be able to call my mom, and my mom came and got me. There was like times where I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to call my mom to come get me. What do I do? I would, mind you, during this time, I was coming back and forth working my second job every other weekend. So I was coming back and home every weekend, but I didn't tell anybody because it was very difficult to have that conversation of driving back and forth to go to your job. And I didn't have a car at the time because my car was smashed. So I was using his, and you would get threatening phone calls, threatening text messages. You better be home. I'm going to call the cops because you have a truck. And I'm like, first off, I'm at my job. And you're trying to like figure out what's going on throughout the weekend because I didn't bring anything with me, thinking at some point in time I would sober up on my own. Mm-hmm. So I would just go back in the vicious cycle where I'd go back. He's like, here's some drugs. Oh, here's this. And you just continue. And it was horrible. So I finally called my mom one day when I was like sober enough, and he's at work. I'm like, listen, I need you to come get me. And she's like, well, how far are you? I said, I'm 2 hours away from the house. I need you to come get me. And she came back and got me. And that was the most silent car ride ever. Mm-hmm. I didn't think I could have more of a silent car ride to my mom of disappointment, or it was like, I'm really glad you called. I couldn't tell which one it was. I was just like, you came and got me. And she's like, do you have your stuff? I'm like, yes, I have my stuff. She's like, we'll put it in the car and we're leaving. I'm like, okay. And we never talked for the 2-hour car ride. Wow. It was like one of those things where you didn't have the conversation because you didn't need to of why she came and got you.
Right.
It's weird. It's wild. Like thinking now because I'm sober, I'm like, what just happened? I'm like, I don't, and you know, it was weird because I never really experienced with drugs besides smoking marijuana until then when I went to college. I'm like, who was that person? And I'm like looking back in pictures and like looking back at certain things. I'm like, I don't remember any of that because of how much you got influenced.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's scary. Like, I didn't think drugs were going to be like when they tell you in school, oh, drugs is a gateway drug and don't get wrapped into it. And you're like, no, I never will. And you're like, oh, no, I did.
Yeah.
I'm like, where do you go from there? You're like, what bridges did you burn and which bridges are you trying to repair? Right. And I think that was also hard because I don't think I burned many bridges, maybe 2 or 3. And that's why I don't think like my mom, like I always knew I could call her and be like, hey, I have a problem. Because I couldn't be honest with her at first where I'm like, I have an addiction problem. I need help. It was more of, I really just need you to come get me. I just need you to come get me.
Right.
And I mean, probably wouldn't change it for the world to call my mom.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes, right, like it's gotten to the point of where you make the call and the talk comes later, right? Because you've gotten so far in. And I think too, it's important to think about like all these drugs and things that you got into. I mean, similar stories to a lot of people, I'm sure, on the fact that you're using these drugs to cover up, right? So many emotions, like things started happening in your life when you were 3 years old, and here we are all the way down here. You're still dealing with life-altering things, and you just want to figure out how to feel good. And at that point in your mind, right, that's what's going to do it, or how to forget about the things that have hurt you.
Yeah, that was every day.
Yeah.
You have to get high to feel better because that's the only way to feel better. And it was hard.
Right.
It was very hard because that's the only thing that would make you feel better, and you couldn't get out of it. Like, it was always, I need the drug to feel better. I need alcohol to feel better. I need to just get high and go party because that's what made me feel better. But it doesn't make you feel better. When you drop down, it just makes you more depressed when you sober up.
Right. Absolutely. When your mom came and picked you up and brought you back home, did you struggle with your addiction then, or how did you, continue on your path to recovery and stay sober?
I stayed sober the whole time. I mean, I didn't have to go, like, I talked to certain, like, I didn't have to go to, like, a recovery place. I ended up still having insurance through my dad, and I still had insurance through my job that I was still paying for, so I was able to at least see somebody. The only downfall is when you're a recovering addict, it's very hard to see a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
You can go talk to people, and I had like a counselor, but I didn't have to go through the full 12-step program. It was more of, I just need someone to talk to. I could pass a drug test. I know I could pass a drug test, but it was more of, if I really feel like I'm going to use again, I just need someone to talk to. I think it's not as common to be able to just quit cold turkey, but I think that was like the eye opener. If my mom came and got me, I need to stay sober.
Right. You just took the toxicity out of your life, and then to follow, right, you were able to do those things and kind of be your own advocate a little bit more.
Yeah, it definitely shows the power of the mind, and sometimes it's as simple as taking yourself out of the situation, making sure you're surrounded with the positive influences, and daily choosing to stay sober and
right.
follow the habits that you want to. Oh, what was it like? Is that when you started your business when you came back, or how did that evolve?
So I ended up coming back. Krishana came back around. Krishana had then broken up with her girlfriend like maybe like 6 months prior, a year prior. So Krishana started coming back around, and I'm like, okay, I didn't have a car, I didn't have anything. I was at my mom's house. I didn't have anything. I had to go back to my old job, trying to like start in face first. I lived with my dad a little while before that. Like, I came home, I moved with my dad for a little while, and I came back home. After that, I moved in with Krishana, and I was like, listen, like, we're not going to be together unless we have this conversation. And it was kind of like a conversation of, are you sorry for what you did? Do you understand what you did? Have we gotten anywhere? Like, I understand it's been like 3 to 4 years, but have we gotten anywhere to understand what happened? She actually apologized to my mom for the whole situation that had happened, and like sat down with her and had a conversation even prior to like us going back out. And we got back together, and I was like walking back and forth to work every day. So that's why I stayed at Krishana's house. I worked 2 jobs. And then I ended up getting a job at a dealership to where I was able to get a car. I bought it off my buddy Damien, who I run my business with now in Krishana. I worked at the dealership for a while, and then went to a different dealership. And then we all got COVID. So it started with my little brother right before Christmas. Krishana got really sick, had no taste or no smell.
Mm-hmm.
I got really sick right afterwards. Tyler did not get sick at all, which I'm very impressed from, because he worked almost the whole time. And then my mom got sick. So my mom ended up in the hospital for 5 days. So she had COVID and pneumonia. And I was already quarantining. So I was already quarantining for like 3 weeks prior to this. And I mean, being quarantined in your house with your family, like, don't get me wrong, I love them all, but they kind of drive you nuts.
Right.
COVID was also very rough when it came out, which was March 2020. That, like, when the whole world shut down, I signed to build my house the day before the world shut down.
Oh my word.
That's when the mask mandate came out. Mind you, I'm used to being strangled. I can't breathe it as it is. I wake up in panic attacks
Right.
because of all the situations that happen of abuse. Having to wear this mask all day makes me feel like I'm getting choked. So it was a lot of anxiety during COVID. It was like, I don't know if I'm going to lose my job. Well, we're essential, so we stayed open. I don't know how I'm going to afford to buy my house now. I need to be able to move my mom so she doesn't go homeless. It was just a lot, to be honest with you, where you're trying to go through all of your stuff. And COVID just put a ringer in everything, where you're like, at first we're like, oh, no one's going to catch COVID. And then we caught COVID. And with that being said, once my mom finally came home, they're like, oh, well, she's going to need a home nurse. And I'm like, okay, but you don't have any nurses as it is in the hospital. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, there's no nurses. I was like, I can't get a nurse to my house. And Krishana has been injured since 2020 and has been out of work because she had the back injury that we're still fighting on. So I go, well, if my mom falls, they're like, well, she can't fall. She can't get scratched because she's on blood thinners because she can get a blood clot. And she's like, if she falls, she has to go to the emergency room. I'm like, okay. I'm like, so I have someone here that can't lift over 25 pounds. And I go, you can't send me a nurse to help me with any type of physical therapy. I don't know what her heart's supposed to sound like. I don't know what her lungs are supposed to sound like. I don't know what activities to do. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, I had to make a decision where I'm like, do I go back to work? Because I went back to work for quarantine. I went back to work for a day. I had a cough because the whole 3 weeks I didn't wear a mask because I've been at home. And by the time that happened, I'm like, okay, well, you sent me home for a cough. What do I do? And then we had my mom's doctor's appointment. They're like, well, we need home health care there. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do if home health care does not show up? They're like, well, someone has to be home. So I had to make the decision. Do I wait for home health care and have the case being that my mom falls and Krishana cannot pick her up and Krishana injures herself more? Or do I turn in the case being that I need to stay home? So I made the decision and told my boss that I have to stay home because my mom came first. My mom has always put me first. And it was just to the point where I had to put her first. So putting her first means I have to figure out what to do and work from home. I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 job. I did not want to work a high stress job. I did not want to work a continuous work. If there's an emergency, I need to be able to leave without having to write an email, without having to have anything like that. I didn't want it anymore. So we all had a discussion while my mom was in the hospital. Me, Damien, and Krishana were like, okay, we've been talking about this for like 2 years, ongoing, on and off for like 2 years. We're like, we'll start a business. And I'm like, okay, we all got COVID. Can we just make a decision? So we ended up making the decision to open up the business. So that's where Colin's Detailing had came about, because now we're doing auto tinting and detailing, which is something where I can jam out in my own garage or at Damien's garage, and I can just clean a car and just be with us three that have been together for well over 10 years. And it's much more enjoyable being home and knowing for a fact that A, I can take care of my family, and B, also that, I mean, if it wasn't for COVID, I'd still be at a job that I probably really wouldn't enjoy. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to be empowered. I wanted to be something amazing and be successful. And I think that's where I know Mariah has been extremely just empowering in the things where I'm like, I'm so proud over a telephone, even if we don't see each other in front of like talking, or we go see each other, we go get coffee. Like, I'm just empowered by how much she did, where I'm like, well, I'm just going to do it. And we all made the decision, and we were going to open up in March, but then my mom got sick. So I said, we're just going to open up February 1st. Mm-hmm. It's pretty slow right now, which is fine. But I mean, after the snow melts, we're going to be busy, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being a strong person with 2 other people that I couldn't ask to be better business partners. I wouldn't change it for the world, to be honest with you.
Right. Like, I think so many things, like we always think about all the bad things that have come from COVID, right? But when we really think about all the good things that have come from COVID, there's been a lot of things, you know. We may have had to deal with a lot of sickness and a lot of like sickness that we weren't expecting, but at the same time, I think it's caused a lot of people to really like reclaim their power and say, you know what, like there's got to be more than a corporate 9-to-5, right? There's got to be more that I have to, you know, my dreams matter. I need to feel worthy. You like really struggle with a lot of those feelings during COVID. And then there's really been a lot that's really blossomed out of it, I think.
Because you're in those times, especially when you're quarantined, you have a lot of time to reflect
Right.
and take time to figure out the things that serve you and the things that don't. And for me, that was a big thing too, is just sloughing off the things that don't have
Bring
any
you
purpose
joy, yeah.
and don't move you closer to your goal. So it's so amazing to see a U-turn that, I mean, literally turning lemonade out of lemons. It's amazing.
Right. So where are you guys located? Tell us where you're located. What like platforms are you on? And we will definitely share all her information afterwards as far as the business goes, so you guys can get there. But tell us a little bit about where you're at.
So we are currently located in Joliet. I'm working out of Damien's garage right now.
Okay.
So something just simple, just because trying to find anything right now is going to be next to impossible because rent rates are extremely high.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're on TikTok. Where else we're at? We're on TikTok, right? TikTok and like Facebook's like my majority.
Okay.
A lot of like the small business groups.
Okay.
We're on a lot of those. So that's where we're doing like a lot of our postings right now. I have like our business cards as well. So if anyone needs any of those,
Yeah,
I'm always
definitely.
happy with that.
And we can totally team up with you too. And we have some places that we can put business cards. I mean, at the office where we live and things, we can surely get business cards out. And then after this, we'll, like I said, just shoot us an email and we can get any links, anything like that, anything that you want us to share on our platform will definitely get shared.
Thank you so much. We are so honored to have you as a guest, and thank you so much for being so raw and so open and so vulnerable and sharing your story. It really helps when we can come together and just have a moment to just talk and find commonalities. And our journeys are all colored very, very differently. So it's amazing to hear your journey and your story and to see how far you've come through everything. So thank you again.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks for being part of the story. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for being our first guest. We really appreciate it. So yeah, go shoot me that email and we will get everything shared about your business, okay?
No problem. See you guys later.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We appreciate it so much. We've got so much more to come. We've got great guests lined up. If you want to be a guest speaker on our show, we'd love to have you. We've got a form that we'll send out and post on our timelines, on Instagram, Facebook. You can shoot us a direct message.
Right.
We've got a bunch of new products that we're really excited to launch.
Sporting a few.
Celebrating the coming up
22.
If you're a numerology nut like I am, you know how awesome and spectacular. It's just, I just love it. I'm super excited. This is once in a lifetime happening, I feel like, right? This is never going to happen again, ever. And then we've got some time capsules that we're going to be making as well, because we just found out that her baby girl is going to be graduating in the class of 33. Which is really exciting. So
hopefully create some personalized time capsules, right, for the kiddos. And then we'll do, they'll make them on 2/22/22, and then hopefully open them, right, on 3/3/33 in their graduation year. So we're really excited to be able to launch those. We got to go get some thoughts on it. And then these shirts for 2/22/22 will be on Etsy by tonight and on Facebook Marketplace, so don't miss out.
And we'll have a bunch of decals and glasses, a bunch more things to come as well. Thank you so much again for joining us on Monumental Minds, and make sure you keep those good vibes spreading.
Right.
Spreading those good vibes. I always mess that up.
Right, and follow us, right, because you don't want to miss who's next Saturday, right? We're going to announce halfway through the week, so just stay tuned with us. Have a good night, guys.
Have a good night.